Reba McEntire storms off today with Jenna and Friends show after heated clash. The cameras hadn't even stopped rolling when the tension became too much to hide. The bright lights of the Today with Jenna and Friends set, usually warm and inviting, seemed to sharpen into a spotlight of judgment. Reba McEntire, country music legend and beloved figure of resilience, leaned forward in her chair, her honey-red hair shimmering under the stage lights, her voice steady yet charged with emotion. She had just been asked a question, not the kind that honored her legacy, but one that cut to the bone, questioning her relevance in a changing world of entertainment. A flash of silence followed, the kind that prickled across skin and demanded reaction. And then, with the poise of someone who had fought too many battles to be dismissed, Reba stood, gathered her notes, and walked off the set, leaving Jenna and the panel of co-hosts stunned in her wake. To the public, it would appear as drama. Another celebrity storming off to feed the cycle of headlines. But what no one yet knew was that this moment would open a door, not of conflict, but of compassion, healing, and a lesson in humanity the world desperately needed. Backstage, Reba's breath came heavy, her chest rising and falling like someone carrying invisible weights. She had spent decades building her career, through heartbreaks, tragedies, and countless nights on stage where she sang until her voice cracked. To have it reduced, even in jest, stung like salt in an old wound. Yet it wasn't pride that fueled her steps away from the spotlight, it was exhaustion, the kind that comes not from years but from the weight of expectation. She reached for her phone, scrolling through messages she hadn't answered. Friends had written. Family had tried calling. Somewhere between her concerts, appearances, and endless interviews, she had lost touch with something essential, the quiet reassurance that she was more than her name. More than Reba the star. She was Reba, the woman. As the crew murmured and producers scrambled, Jenna Bush Hager followed quietly, her heels clicking against the floor. Jenna wasn't a stranger to tension, she had grown up in the political limelight, had seen conflict dressed in 1,000 forms. But today wasn't about managing optics or smoothing over television awkwardness. She saw something deeper in Reba's eyes as she left the set, something raw, something fragile. She called out gently, "Reba, wait." The singer paused, her hand brushing against the cold steel of the exit door. For a heartbeat, she didn't turn. Then, slowly, she faced Jenna, her jaw tight but her eyes shimmering with unspoken tears. "You know," Reba said, her voice cracking just slightly, "sometimes I wonder if people see the woman or just the stage lights." That moment, unguarded, unpolished, hung in the air between them. Jenna, often praised for her empathy, felt her throat tighten. She could have offered apologies or excuses. But instead, she stepped forward, placing a hand over her heart. "Reba, people see you. But maybe what they need to see more is not the performer, but the person. The Reba who's lived through storms and still gets up to sing." Something shifted in Reba. The walls she had built, strong as oak from years in the industry, began to crack. She let out a shaky breath and shook her head. "I walked off because I felt invisible out there. Like all they cared about was the headlines." "And maybe," Jenna said softly, "this is the headline that can teach people something more." Neither woman noticed the producer who had paused nearby, listening. Neither realized that the tension captured on live television would become the catalyst for something far greater than a morning show feud. Because outside the studio, in homes across America, people weren't just watching a country star walk off a stage. They were watching vulnerability. Something the world had almost forgotten how to honor. The internet lit up within minutes. Some mocked, some defended, but others, thousands of others, recognized themselves in Reba's walk-off. They saw a mother who had worked tirelessly only to feel unappreciated. A teacher ignored after years of service. A caregiver whose sacrifices went unnoticed. Reba's storm wasn't about ego, it was about humanity's quiet plea to be seen. And that struck a chord far beyond music. The following day, Reba sat in her hotel room, curtains drawn against the New York skyline. She thought about her father, who had taught her to stand tall no matter what. She thought about her mother, who reminded her that storms don't destroy, they cleanse. Her phone buzzed relentlessly with interview requests, but she ignored them all, until one caught her eye. It wasn't from a journalist, but from a children's hospital in Tennessee. The message was simple: the kid saw you walk off yesterday. They're asking if you're okay. They want to sing with you. For the first time in days, Reba smiled. Not the polished smile for cameras, but a real one. She booked a flight without telling her team, without alerting the press. By evening, she walked into the children's wing of the hospital, greeted by a chorus of small voices. Some were in wheelchairs, others with 4 poles beside them, yet every single one lit up at her arrival. They didn't care about headlines. They cared about her. A little girl with a shaved head and eyes as bright as morning sunshine reached for Reba's hand. "We saw you on TV," she whispered. "You looked like us, tired. But you came anyway." Reba knelt, tears streaming freely now. "Honey," she said softly, "sometimes tired is where the best songs come from." That night, she sang not on a stage, not before cameras, but in a hospital playroom decorated with paper stars. Her voice filled the sterile halls, not with perfection but with soul. Parents cried. Nurses hummed along. Children, some fighting battles no adult could imagine, sang back with voices stronger than any choir. Word spread quickly, not through tabloids, but through the whispers of families who had witnessed it. And when a clip surfaced online, grainy, recorded on a nurse's phone, it went viral. The world saw Reba not storming off a set, but storming into a hospital with love. The narrative had flipped. Compassion had written its own headline. Back at the Today show, Jenna watched the footage with tears streaming. She called Reba, her voice breaking with gratitude. "You didn't just walk off, Reba. You walked into something bigger than both of us. You reminded people what it means to be human." Reba chuckled softly on the other end. "Well, darlin', maybe storms aren't about endings. Maybe they're just about clearing skies for the next song." And so, what began as a clash ended as a movement. People across the country shared stories of their own storms. Moments when they felt unseen, unheard, unappreciated. Teachers were thanked, nurses honored, parents hugged tighter. Communities organized concerts and gatherings, not to glorify celebrities, but to celebrate everyday heroes who walked through storms with grace. Reba returned to the Today show weeks later, not as a guest under scrutiny but as a woman with a message. She looked into the camera, her voice steady and warm. "If you feel invisible," she said, "know this, you matter. Your storm does not define you. What you do with it does. And sometimes, walking away is just another way of walking toward what truly matters." The audience erupted in applause, but more than that, they felt it in their hearts. Reba had turned a moment of conflict into a song of compassion. She had reminded the world that kindness, even in its smallest forms, can ripple outward like music, carrying hope into places where silence once lived. And long after the headlines faded, long after the cameras moved on, that message remained, a quiet truth woven into the fabric of everyday lives: storms pass, love lingers, and humanity, at its best, always finds a way to sing again.